This is the second part of Sinister soft drinks, essentially how soda is poison and is killing you. We'll start off by talking about packaging worries. Bisphenol A, slide 1. Bisphenol A has been suspected of being hazardous to humans since the 1930s. Bisphenol A has caused reverse sexual development in the brains of lab animals and general sexual behavior, as well as an increase in prostate and breast cancer risk. Bisphenol A is an endocrine disruptor, a phthalate and a xenoestrogen, which can mimic the body's own hormones and block receptors. This may lead to negative health effects. Boys born to mothers with the highest levels of phthalates were 7 times more likely to have a shortened anogenital distance, essentially the distance between the anus and the genitals, and were more likely to experience incomplete testicular descent and smaller overall genital size. Slide 2. A 2008 review has concluded that obesity may be an increased function of bisphenol A exposure. They actually quoted, merits concern among scientists and public health officials. A 2008 review has concluded that the neonatal exposure, the exposure essentially the period immediately after birth up to a time period of 1 month, to bisphenol A can affect sexually dimorphic brain development. Essentially what they're trying to say is that male brains became female brains and female brains became male brains. A 2008 review concluded that BPA, bisphenol A, altered the hippocampus, a part of the brain that has to do with memory, and with so many people getting Alzheimer's, it's something to be worried about. A 2005 review concluded that prenatal, the time period before birth, and neonatal exposure to BPA in mice can act on the dopamine systems, resulting in the supersensitivity to drugs of abuse, also hyperlocomotion. With so many people experiencing hyperactivity, this is another concern. A 2007 review concluded that bisphenol A has been shown to bind to the thyroid hormone receptor and perhaps have selective effects on its functions. Studies have suggested that BPA could promote the growth of cancer cells. A 2010 study concluded that BPA essentially could promote invasion and reproduction of cancer cells through the overexpression of certain proteins as well as decreased effects of other proteins. In this slide you see aluminum cans. The one prior you saw plastic bottles. Plastic bottles that can be clear and many times also bottles which aren't clear, and not just those which are being used to store soft drinks, essentially contain bisphenol A. If it's clear, it's got bisphenol A. If it doesn't, there's a good chance that it might. It's not just soda that has this problem. In aluminum cans, you might believe you are safe, but by law, all cans, it can be soda cans or it could be a soup can, needs to have a liner. And guess what that liner is made out of? Bisphenol A. It's not that aluminum would be much better for you. Alright, just look into the health effects of aluminum. It's something also to be worried about. Bisphenol A by the numbers. At 0.025 micrograms per kilogram, there are permanent changes in the genital tract, changes in the breast tissue that predispose those cells to hormones and carcinogens. At 1 microgram per kilogram, BPA exposure causes long-term adverse reproductive and carcinogenic effects. A fancy way of saying you're going to get cancer. At 2 micrograms per kilogram, a 1997 study showed an increase in prostate weight by 30%. At 2.4 micrograms per kilogram, there is a decline in testicular testosterone. At 2.5 micrograms per kilogram, breast cells were predisposed to cancer. At 10 micrograms per kilogram, prostate cells were more sensitive to hormones and cancer. There was a decrease in maternal behavior. A 2005 study in mice found that neonatal BPA exposure disrupted the development of the fetal mouse prostate. A 2006 study in rats showed that the neonatal exposure increases prostate gland susceptibility to adult-onset precancerous lesions and hormonal carcinogenesis. Carcinogenesis is essentially a word meaning the creation of cancer. A 2009 study found that low dose actually could increase prostate cancer susceptibility when animals were adults. At 30 micrograms per kilogram, there was a reverse in the normal sex differences in brain structure and behavior. At 50 micrograms per kilogram, there was reverse neurological effects in primates. There was a disruption in ovarian development in mice, and actually permanently altered the hypothalamic estrogen-dependent mechanisms that govern the sexual behavior in the adult female rat. A 2007 study found that bisphenol A within the range of concentrations currently measured in human plasma is associated with a permanent increase in prostate size. Prenatal exposure to bisphenol A actually affected the behavior of sexual differentiation in male monkeys. Essentially, you had male monkeys engaging in behavior that's more attributed to female monkeys. Bisphenol A exposure disrupted the blood testis barrier when administered to immature but not to adult rats. Exposure to bisphenol A in the workplace could produce sexual dysfunction in the male adult human. The measure of bisphenol A currently in our workplace could actually already be taking a great effect on us. After this slide was made, there was a study where essentially there's some similarities between frogs and human beings, And they administered bisphenol A to frogs and found that the male and females both developed reproductive organs of the opposite sex, essentially becoming hermaphrodites. Another issue with soft drinks are the preservatives, sodium benzoate in particular. Let's start off with a quote from a Coca-Cola spokesperson. We've looked at removing sodium benzoate for a number of years and a move towards having no artificial additives. Our decision is based on emerging consumer trends for natural. Sodium benzoate, known in the European Union as E211, and its other forms, potassium benzoate E212 and calcium benzoate E213, are preservatives that have a very controversial use in modern foods, beverages, and several cough medicines. In combination with citric acid or any acid like carbonic acid, which is essentially carbonated water, sodium benzoate will form benzene. Heat and light from the sun as well as shelf life will also affect the rate at which benzene is formed. It's a foregone conclusion, it's just a matter of time. Sodium benzoate by itself can damage and inactivate vital parts of DNA in a cell's mitochondria, hence aging. There are many illnesses now tied to DNA damage, including Parkinson's and other neurodegenerative diseases. Benzene is a chemical that's been used as a fuel additive, was found in many consumer products such as paint strippers, rubber cements, and spot removers due to its solvent capabilities. It's been removed over the years because it's a known carcinogen that also can cause leukemia. Let's have a word from the CDC. Benzene works by causing cells not to work correctly. For example, it can cause bone marrow not to produce enough red blood cells, which can lead to anemia. Also, it can damage the immune system by changing blood levels of antibodies and causing the loss of white blood cells. Researchers at the University of North Carolina of Public Health concluded that benzene was linked to many forms of leukemia. Scientific studies indicate that workers who use benzene solvents are at risk of developing cancer and blood diseases from exposure to benzene. Perrier water, a pretty much respectful luxury brand of bottled water, was sampled in 1990. Several times they reported high levels of benzene. The amount of benzene contamination ranged from 12.3 to 19.9 parts per billion. The Federal Environmental Protection Agency has established maximum contamination level of only 5 parts per billion of benzene in public drinking supplies. So essentially your public drinking water, your run-of-the-mill average tap water, all right, it has a safe level which is by far was exceeded by benzene in Perrier water. All right. The widely used food preservative sodium benzoate has been linked to hyperactivity in children, according to a study from British researchers. Also, there's a push to phase out sodium benzoate in the European Union. Further studies have suggested that high intake of sodium benzoate could lead to diminished IQ of up to 5.5 points. Sodium benzoate has been used as a bacteriostatic and a fungostat, and is also one of the key ingredients in a drug known as ammoniol, which is actually used to decrease the amount of ammonia in the body. Something to be concerned about. Another interesting thing is you want to know how sodium benzoate works as a preservative. It actually destroys DNA. That's how it destroys bacteria. But anyway, one of the things you have to be concerned about is that during the course of me and several students creating this presentation, we found a lot more information that we just didn't have time to share. At this point, this was the end of the PowerPoint. We had an interactive session with the class, but there was still information we had to leave out. Alright, you can look at, let's say, the artificial colors and dyes. Most of them are made from coal or other petrochemicals and have been linked to hyperactivity, obesity, and cancer, and many other things. You also have to be concerned about natural flavors. Really, how natural are they? Many natural flavors are encased in alcohol, glycerin, or gelatin from genetically modified organisms. Sometimes natural flavoring is just a throw word for MSG. I've actually talked to people in the soda industry and soft drink industry while I was making this report, and they shared concern with me that they really would like to produce natural, healthy beverages, but the way the corporations control the market, they would be out of business if they tried. It's no longer cost effective. The government subsidizes corn sugar, so that's what everyone's forced to use. Another interesting thing is that when they switched from using saccharin, an artificial sweetener, to aspartame, alright, saccharin was known to cause cancer, and as you've seen, aspartame isn't exactly much healthier. They actually said that their machines, the O-rings in the machines, were being eaten up as if an acid was added to them. It was only in the diet sodas, so it was only the sodas which had aspartame that were damaging their machines. They didn't know what was causing it, but it's something they were worried about. I could keep on going and talking about, what's in our food nowadays, but I figured I'll end this video here. Take care.